Good morning. Welcome to the first policy meeting of the 2025 year. Welcome, everybody. This, just to let you know, this meeting is being recorded, and we have, I believe, one member of the board online, and three members of the board online, and if any of our members are joining online via the community, you can submit questions through the chat. And without further ado, should I pass it to you, Megan, to start the meeting?
Sure. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Happy New Year. We are picking up from our last policy meeting, which was in November. And at that time, you'll see we have and a couple items that are first readings and proposed for adoption for us to review today, as well as some administrative regulations, one of which is new and has been pending for a while. So I'm excited to bring this forward for discussion today. There's some minor revisions that were made to 812 we just wanted to bring to your attention, but I believe they would fall in the non-substantive category, so technically we wouldn't always bring those to you, but for the purposes of today's meeting, we thought we would just bring that to your attention, and then we'll talk a little bit about those that are pending for future discussion at the end. So without further ado, at the top of our agenda today is an item 718, service animals in schools, which again we've looked at a few times in committee and is now proposed for adoption with the revisions as reflected on pages 1 through 13.
Do we have any questions from the board? Yeah.
I have one question, and I was reviewing this yesterday, and if I may be confused, but is there a time frame for the turnaround? So, you know, parents must submit a written request to the Director of Student Services. How long does that, does the Director of Student Services have to respond? Because I think when I was looking through staff, there's a staff section, and that was, what, 3 weeks notification? Is that the same?
Can you just,
where is
which
it?
page you're looking at, just make sure I'm on the same page. Page.
Yeah. It's page 2.
Page 2.
Procedures applicable to students with disabilities. So under that first paragraph, number 1, parents must submit written request. Mm-hmm. And so if there's a time frame under which we're supposed to, the Director of Student Services is expected to respond by, just so that there's a, I don't know if that's necessary or not, but I was just wondering because there is something, there's a time frame listed.
End of page 3.
Thank you. Sorry, it's different for.
Page 3, right?
Yes, thank you. Under other procedures applicable to both students and staff, it says, requests may be made no less than 3 weeks prior to the proposed use of service animal. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I think there is likely under law and regulation a time period. I know Ken's working on something now, so in the interim, I think we could say, while he's multitasking, we would follow the law in terms of what the time frame is. Certainly a reasonable, what is a reasonable time period? Often we've inserted like a time period to say by this time, and if we need additional time, we would, you know, respond accordingly and let the person know that.
Okay.
But that minimally that 3-week period would seem more than reasonable to me.
I'm sorry, I apologize that I'm trying to notify witnesses of this afternoon's hearing being postponed. That's correct. It's going to end up being, sometimes it's going to end up being a little bit case by case, but that 3 weeks is defensible.
Okay, I just figured it would be, since it's put in one spot and not the other, perhaps it would be helpful to have something somewhat consistent.
In the 3-week period below, though, is about the timing on which the request is made.
Right.
Right, so there's a processing, yes, so I think we could certainly add that up to, in that maybe as a.
Can I follow up on that real quick? And this is just for clarity more than anything else. So if it fell under a student with an IEP, then the 10 days to respond and 30 days to review, that would typically fall under it. And if it's a 504, we have different regulations. And then, but it's, I guess the only concern I have is if it's not either of those two, then does this fall under service animals support? Is there a law kind of governing the response time around that? Because I know there's response time in the other, when you have those other supports. Is there a general response time for this, for a kid that doesn't have an IEP and a kid that doesn't have a 504?
Would there be,
That's actually what I was referring to. To just distinguish between the two, there are timelines embedded in the procedures that apply from an IEP 504 standpoint. I thought we were referring to those that would fall just under a general ADA.
Yeah, and I guess that's my question.
Is ADA, more general,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that's my question.
That's what I was responding.
Because it's the same, when we have conversations around restraints, it's the same thing. There are more guidelines associated with certain things based on if you have an IEP or you have a 504, but when there's not, you fall in that window of not protected, it would just fall under the ADA. And are there time guidelines? I didn't think there were.
There really aren't. That kind of falls under the rubric of thought to be, because I'm trying to imagine a scenario where a student who didn't qualify for an IEP or a 504 would have an entitlement to a service animal.
thank you, that's what I was curious
If they had
about.
entitlement to a service animal, then their entitlement would fall under 504 or ADA, but ADA would, I'm struggling.
Doctor recommendation without a 504.
I'm sorry, what?
Could it fall under a doctor recommendation for mental health needs without a 504? And again, the only reason, I think it's a really good point that sometimes there are gaps between the policies for kids in just general support structure.
No, you're right. And those are the students that, district has no awareness of a condition that might require an accommodation. So if it turned out to be that requirement for accommodation was a service animal, then the district would typically approach it as, oh, okay, we need to look at this under a Section 504 lens, and we need to follow whatever timelines apply to Section 504. So the legal entitlement would be based upon Section 504, and there are some time, I don't know what they are off the top of my head, but there are timelines embedded in that. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but the entitlement would come under 504.
So you're saying that there is no possible way that this would move forward unless a child was either under an IEP or a 504?
It could move forward, but it could move forward, but it wouldn't necessarily move forward as an entitlement. And since if it's not an entitlement, there are no legal timelines.
Got it. Okay, so that's the answer. So if a kid does not have a 504 or an IEP, there are no timelines. So then the question back to the board is, do you? No, that's 3 weeks to notify the school. There are no timelines for the school to respond back to a student unless you put it in the AR.
Correct.
That's where my question went. I was just, so.
Ken and I knew this.
That's my question is, when do families find out, yes or no, essentially? What is the expected response turnaround time?
But I'm stuck on understanding Ken's question. Even if you had, wouldn't it be incumbent on the district to ask a student who presented the need for a therapy dog or a service animal to apply for a 504 to receive the accommodation?
I would think, well, yeah.
I don't think you have to, but.
Well, no, that's why I call it the thought to be 504. Once the district's on notice of a student who is thought to be either exceptional eligible for an IEP or eligible for a Section 504, then the obligation does shift to the district to start doing things in a certain time frame. I can't imagine a scenario where if a family came to the district and said, we're making a request for a service animal, I cannot imagine a scenario where the district wouldn't simply say, oh, we need to now go into evaluative mode to see if you qualify for a 504 or an IEP.
Could we also add to the AR that the superintendent responds within a certain time to the request? Because let's say this situation did arise, then I believe the concern you all are saying is if the district doesn't respond and the student is in need of the services, then there could be a gap in student having the animal.
Or I agree too, because of the fact that sometimes it takes a while to get the IEP or 504 established.
And not all parents feel comfortable having their kid have a IEP or a 504, so they don't walk that forward. So I think any of these reasons, do we want to have a safety net?
Well, the answer to the question is you're certainly free to do so. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to know, and I could be missing this, in that number 1 on page 3, requests for the use of service animals on district property must, whenever possible, be made no less than 3 weeks, and here's where I'm, prior to the proposed use of the service animal. So I'm reading this saying that you just have to come to me in 3 weeks, the animal's going in service. I mean, am I reading it wrong? I mean.
It's just a request.
Says
No,
prior to the
you're-
proposed use of the service animal. I get it, under no circumstance, maybe. So then also look at number 2, on page 4, there's got to be a number of safeguards. Trained, I mean, I don't know if there's a licensure or some sort of a certificate, proper inoculations. So there's some time involved.
I would feel more, I don't think you're wrong. I would feel more comfortable if the superintendent was named. To be candid, there is a bit of a lack of trust in the student services department, and so leaving that as the defining
Yeah, but
body.
the superintendent get this deep into the weeds on a service animal. I actually, to me, being an old high school principal, I really come under the principal's domain, to be honest with you. I mean, getting that high in the organization is,
So maybe we should add principal to start?
well, I think, wouldn't the principal be a part of all of this, obviously? The service animal is coming into his or her school, Scott, right? I mean, the principal's going to be involved with it, right?
If you look at the end of page 4, prior to that visit to the principal, so the principal's already named, so it must, I think the next piece could be, and response from the principal. I think that, the only thing I would also say on that is like one spot you have 15 days, the next spot you have 3 weeks.
That was, yeah.
That's,
I like the 3 school days, like 15 school days prior. I think that's really clear. It's 15 actual school days, business days, not 3 weeks. It could be like crazy with the holidays or something like that.
15 school days is kind of 3 weeks, right? That's, I mean, that's.
Either whichever we go with, I think
Yeah,
it should just
yeah,
be clear
yeah,
and
yeah,
consistent. Yeah,
I mean,
that was all
I
my
guess they're
question.
just saying, yeah, it's the same thing. So, and I don't know, this is the use, and this is, I guess, visitors coming in that Curry, that you're looking at there. That's visitors, and one is the full, like, this dog is going to be here every day, or.
Yeah, I think, but if, like, you have that language in there about the principal, so if you're naming them there, maybe that echoing in the other sections about this is the point person for this is the principal because they are the keeper of the building.
So you want to change up in the top of page 4, animal must be on district property without prior approval by the Director of Student Services and Special Education Director of Human Services, whichever is applicable. So I guess the next question is, all of this, like when someone comes in and says, I have a service dog, who are they going to?
Right, that's-
Are they going to they're going to go to the principal, and if they go to the principal, then am I going to send them to, here's the point person for, for something like this, and that would be the,
Yeah, I think more
Director.
commonly, there's, I'm thinking the family's experience, they're probably going to go to the building first to ask for that type of accommodation, which is then referred, and there's a reason why, and however it's spelled out in here, but to make sure that there is some guidance and oversight and consistency in how regulations are applied. That's why there's typically some kind of central office role in that. It doesn't mean that the principal can't run point on it, but they're just to make sure that we're not approving something at Kenwood that doesn't get approved over at Penn Valley, et cetera. So
and that's where you have the consistency of central office, and your director of human resources is your compliance officer.
For employee, employee
Yeah,
matters.
right.
Yeah.
So, you put you have two people. What I would say is pick one of those two, and that's your point person. And unfortunately, I would recommend the director of student services, special education. That's the point person. That person would take care of all of these requests, and they would ensure the documentation is there. Because obviously, with Ken here, the legal ramifications, it's a bigger animal, and the animal decides it's tired someday and bites somebody. And now, does he have rabies? And where are the papers? And you're into a whole other situation. So one person being the point, I would not recommend it being your superintendent. So I would say keep your student services or take director of HR out. So now you have one point person. That's it.
Well, the reason for the director of HR is for employees, not only.
Oh, employees. Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
We
could make that more
stipulate
explicit.
Yeah, that would
Approval
be
from
clear.
parents and approval from employees would be HR. Maybe we could,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying, Ken?
Without approval by the Director of Student Services and Special Education for students and Director of Human Resources with respect to employees.
For employees. Now, what about visitors? Is that the principal?
Visitors.
Principals of visitors, right?
Visitors, we say,
Yeah, is the principal.
is the principal, because that's a one-off.
That's a
for one
one-off, 15 days. Yeah.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I like that better. It's up to you guys.
I had a few other questions or more curiosities, so if you want to table them to just letting me know later, that's fine. My question was, and if it's in here, forgive me, I missed it. If it is a 504 or an IEP, is the district required to coordinate the location and assignment of the animal, or is the parent required? Because the language,
What do you mean?
I'm just saying in general, like, because a lot of the language talks about the family providing the documentation of the animal, but if it would, this is just a curiosity, if it was an IEP or a 504, would the district be required to provide the animal?
Typically, no.
Okay. That's just a curiosity.
Oh, like in other words, to
Yeah, I
pay
like
for
that
all
answer.
the-
Typically, no. I can think of a
Yeah.
scenario under which, yes, I like that
Like
answer.
Yeah,
we're
'cause
approving the
typically-
dog, so we have to pay for the training, and is that what
Yeah.
you're saying?
Yeah, or like
Cow.
if it's stipulated in the IEP that that's the accommodation that is required for them to meet the terms of their IEP, then is the district required to?
If you had, if an IEP was crafted and an IEP team determined that a student could not receive a free appropriate public education without a service animal, I could conceive of a time when, you might say the district has to do it. But I agree with Carrie, that's typically never going to be the case.
And, yeah, because typically it will go through the parents for the whole wraparound services as well, and the child will need it during the day and in the afternoon, and then through that lens back into the school, and it's the school saying, the parents saying, like, these are the supports that our child needs to be a part of the community, this is how school has to marry up to it to connect to it. So typically, I've never seen it that way, but you're right, I could.
But exactly as you just said, Carrie, these are 24-hour-a-day animal accommodations, so it's very unlikely that the parent's going to say, school district, you provide an animal, and then I'll take care of the time when the child's not in school.
Okay. And then I just had two other curiosities. It seemed as if we had much more stipulations for the animal under therapy dog versus service animal around like health and safety and grooming and insurance and these sorts of things. So I was just curious why there's that distinction, or if I missed it, I would assume these same things are required for the service animal as it is for the therapy dog.
Service animals are a legal entitlement. Therapy dogs are not.
Okay. But would we, okay, so service animal, these same things, if they presented, the one that stood out to me the most was the allergic reaction, like removing the service, like what if there's I'm really in the weeds, like do you change the student who has a service animal schedule?
Well, that's why the number one, the presence of the animal poses a direct threat to the health and safety. The district's more constrained over what requirements they put in place for a service animal than it is for a therapy dog. So when you're doing, you don't want to be as prescriptive for the service animals because you have to give the 504 team or the IEP team some latitude in terms of what criteria, what they're going to require as far as determining what's a direct safety, et cetera. With a therapy dog, you can be a little bit more, sorry, the rules are the rules and that's the way it goes.
I hear that. I guess just the concern is if someone has a therapy dog, and this language is, if another student has an allergic reaction to the therapy dog, I'm looking at you, Scott, because I'm thinking it's like a rostering issue. Do you remove the student with the therapy dog because it's not a requirement legally, but is that the right thing to do? Or what if they're in like an AP Chem and there's only one section? How are we providing education to the student that needs the therapy dog? I know I'm really in the weeds, but yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't.
And they are, I mean,
cover
in
all that.
8 years, high school principal, I had it happen one time, and fortunately, we didn't have any of those issues, but what Megan referenced earlier about coordinating with central office, so we apply this.
Okay.
We would have a lot of those conversations. It's a tricky one. I don't want to just make a decision for that one, but I can see complications for both sides of that, especially the last scenario where you said there's one class that both students need. It's pretty challenging.
Okay. And Larry gave me good feedback, like all of that doesn't need to be written in here,
No.
which is fine. Again, like just a curiosity. But I wonder, and I didn't see it in here again if I missed it, I wonder if the distinction between the legal requirement for a service dog versus a therapy dog could be helpful to state somewhere in here for people to understand the difference in what is required for a therapy dog versus what is required from a service dog.
It is written in here, but
Is it? I missed it.
can't remember where it was.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's written
It could be
there.
helpful to reiterate it throughout. I'm sorry.
Or just, and we've done this with other policies before, hyperlink it.
Yeah.
Like, because I think it is confusing for a lot of people in the public too. Again, because in general public settings, it's very different what you can ask people about a service dog than you can a therapy dog. So I think there is a clear distinction, and it might be helpful to kind of say, this is what the state says, and push back to that as well.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, I had a follow-up to what Anna was talking about, because I also wondered, what is the definition of harm under a service dog? And what does that, what level will, and when does it not meet the requirement of that it would affect the educational program? I just wondered what are the guardrails for that?
Whatever a district can defend at a due process hearing is really the guardrails. I guess I would caution about being too specific. You want to leave some amount of wiggle room because.
Well, I'm just wondering if there's precedent for that, because I'm like, allergic reaction, is that harm?
It could be. If your question is there's not a lot of case law on this, if that's where your questions are going. It's going to be very case by case, is all I can.
So
And you know what? And that's why they call them IEPs. They are very individualized, so it's going to be very case.
So it's just case by case and just, you meet it as it happens, yeah.
Ken, at the bottom of page 1, or page 2, bottom, maybe even if we just added therapy dogs are not service animals, as that term is used in the American with Disability Act and is entitled to specific, like, legal requirements, and therefore approval for the use of a therapy dog is entirely up to the district administration.
You're saying move that from the definition?
No, just add that line. Because you say like therapy dogs are not service animals, as that term is used in the American with Disability Act. And therefore, I think that assumes a background knowledge of like what is required under the ADA. And maybe if we just added the information for people's knowledge is the term is used by the ADA and therefore are entitled to legal requirements, the approval of the use of a therapy dog on district property. Just an offering.
I'm just trying to
Therapy dog.
Yeah.
be clear that I understand what you're saying.
Not service animals.
You went-
It says that, right? Term is used in American Disability.
It's kind of under the employee part.
I actually think that that's probably shouldn't be embedded in the definition.
Okay.
I think that should be a separate standalone,
Okay.
and then that way it stands out more for one thing, and, I mean, it's.
I just want families to know how to operate and if they are having a therapy dog or a service dog, and assume that we provide the most clear information for them to know the process to follow.
Could it just be a footnote under the, like, each one has an asterisk on it, and then a footnote under it, these are two distinct things governed under separate rules or something?
I like it better as a
Yeah,
separate.
I would pull it out, just that second, the end of that, so we can say, almost like a comparison or contrast therapy.
distinction.
And then use that sentence. I think we can add that sentence, add something to that.
No?
No, I'm sorry, I'm laughing now. We're saying not to be specific, but we're also talking about rodents up there. Sorry.
Can I make a quick
Yeah, I was just
suggestion?
real on that. There is language in the section about employees. I think it's number 2 on page 3, that feels like it's saying that for the employees, the district's review of a request. And it just says the types of accommodations under the American Disability include there's some copy there that might be able just to be repeated. To do the same thing of what Anna's asking about without being super specific, because we know these terms change, and that's tricky too. So these are the general rules that we fall under. Here's some specific, maybe it can just be echoed. Okay, sorry.
So my comment was going to be that since, in light of the conversation we're having, if we could consider collaborating with like the Committee for Special Ed or families that might have some more insight into this, that might have it, kind of closer to home, that would be helpful so we can understand, how to ensure that things are consistent and clear so that people who may have already kind of gone through a certain navigation can give us their perspective.
Yes, and I think it makes sense in terms of some items that are for future discussion that we will be working with the Committee for Special Education on, that because this is the administrative regulation, we certainly can review that in connection with those other policies and ARs and bring it back with a more complete, because I think there are going to be connections between this and the others that we're looking at anyway, so that would make sense.
Is that it for questions here? Does any of the board members online have any questions?
Hi, yes, this is Kimberly. Thank you, Mel. I do have a question for clarity's sake. In reference to this 50488 rule, are emotional support dogs also covered under that? I mean, there are 4 different categories that I'm aware of: service, working, therapy, and emotional. Where do those other ones fall into this process?
Everything that's not a service animal would fall under this therapy dog. Therapy dog is defined to include individually trained and certified to work with its trained handler to provide emotional support, comfort, therapeutic benefits, emotional well-being. So that would cover emotional support dogs.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board online? Okay, I take. And do we have any questions in the chat?
Yes, I have one regarding this policy. Michelle Vessel from Gladwin. Curious, did you ever find out how many service dogs are actually used in our district? I remember at the last meeting, the question was asked and nobody knew the answer. Then she also says, I also remember at the last meeting, Mr. Roos stated that the only reason this policy is being looked at is because his law firm did it for another school district and thought, why not update ours the same way? It isn't being looked at because we have an actual need or issue with the policy. Why are we spending so much time on this policy? Do we not have any other more pressing issues to address? And then she goes into another anti-Semitism training topic, so and there's more on that, so we can wait till the end. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for their question. I believe people who have service animals would appreciate us having an updated policy that is congruent with what their needs. But did we find the question, anything about the answer?
From that before the end of this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any questions from the community members in the audience who would like ask about this policy? No, okay, thank you. So,
Mel, just to clarify too, this policy is 6 years old, so in part of the work of the policy committee, we've made a commitment to go through methodically and look at the policies that need to be updated in accordance with the timeline.
thank you for that addition. Thanks. Now, from all the discussions, is this a policy that, are the changes that we have talked about, are they over the point, can we still move forward with the changes we've discussed, or do we need to take it back for another round?
You didn't make any changes to the policy.
Oh, I thought we were just adding that one statement.
Oh, you were adding that to the policy. I thought that was going in there. Okay.
Oh, no, so the policy, so it's the AR, thank you, I'm sorry.
So the policy can be approved, although
Yes.
I'm not sure, I mean, unless you're, I think it's incumbent to have the administrative regulation finished before you adopt the policy.
Okay.
So if the administrative regulation isn't in a place where you're comfortable with it, if you wanted to talk about it again at the next policy meeting, my recommendation, since you're not under any timeline here, it would be to do a repeat first read of this policy at the next meeting.
And in the meantime, we're complying with the law.
Yeah, and I don't want anybody to think that by deferring this for an extra month that the district's going to be out of compliance or anything. The district's still going to be following the law. This district's still going to be adhering to the principles set forth in these drafts. But it's best practice to update these policies periodically, and that's okay. So my suggestion is repeat first read, come back with the regulations so everybody's comfortable with it at the next meeting. That makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Is it, we good with that?
I'm sorry, excuse me. I have one more that came in on this topic. Allison Crawford from Balkinwood. I also would like to know how many animals are currently in schools. While I appreciate the exacting attention to this wording and topic, I share the concern that there are a number of policies that affect hundreds of students that are in need of consideration and updating. For example, the club and sports financing and overnight trips policies. That's it.
I just want to make it really clear to everyone that we protect every single one of our students. I find this kind of questioning a little shocking when we're talking about kids in need. Every single kid has the right to have a policy that's most up to date by the law, and regardless of the amount of children it affects, every kid has the right to have a policy that works for them. I don't care if it's one kid, I don't care if it's 1,000 kids. We review policies on a basis to ensure that we're not only in compliance, but we're doing the best work for our students. This team has done a great job. I'm excited to be on this committee now and moving through all of those, and I believe that other policy that was just referenced is pretty quick to the table as well.
Okay, thank you. Are there, and no more chat questions? And we're going to have by the end of the day, hopefully or end of this meeting, we'll have an answer about the numbers. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, it's students experience homelessness, or sorry, houselessness.
Houselessness, and that is part of the discussion we had the last time in terms of how we're describing the circumstances in a way that we feel good about and that it's appropriate for this district, because we do have some discretion in what terms we use. We looked at this last in November and made some updates, and where kind of left pending was changing the terminology from homeless to, in this proposed version, to houselessness and other educational instability. So we added that phrasing to that. For discussion.
Okay, so thank you.
Do you want to add something?
No, just to reiterate, there's been no substantive change, I guess, for lack of a better word, to any of this. There hasn't been? There has not been. It was, since we last visited this, it was to address the concerns over how we were referring to the students.
Questions? Well, if nobody, I just was wondering, shouldn't there be commas in the under authority? The students experiencing houselessness, comma, experiencing house, comma, and other students experience educational instabilities.
I think it's repeated, yeah, those words need to be
Yeah. Yeah. Any questions from the board online? I believe anything in the chat. Community members who are present, any questions? Okay. So it appears we are good to move. Looks like, well, I guess are we looking at the AR separately, or are we looking at the?
Sorry, I have a question.
Okay.
Are we in the AR? Are we in the AR?
I think
Yeah.
either.
It's open, it's
Yeah,
open?
it's
Okay.
all open for discussion.
This is, I think it's just an editing question, like a grammar question, or a copy and paste. On page 7, or I guess page 23, thank you, sorry, page 7 of the AR, number 5, under waivers, or waiving specific requirements, what does AMS come from? What is that the end of a word for? Number 5, AMS, parking and driving, food services, unless I'm not looking at it.
I'm sorry, what
correct.
page?
Page 23, number 5, under the, like,
You mean the start of it?
the first, the
That's in there.
first word.
It shouldn't be a separate, it actually is for exams, so it's actually not a separate, it's a typo.
Okay.
So you see
I
how it's
assumed
repeated
that, but I
there.
wanted to make sure.
Yeah. I was
Okay.
like, we do have a lot of acronyms in
That's
education. I
why,
was
that's
like,
honestly why I was like, there must be something here I don't
Could
know.
be something.
Okay, thank you. So that should be looked at.
Strike all of 5.
There we go. Okay. Okay. So that's just a basic type. So I guess we'd be good to agree that we can move forward to a second reading of everything for next meeting?
I think this is a proposed for first reading.
Oh, is it proposed? Oh, is it proposed for first reading? Okay, so we can move to the first reading then. Okay. 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 So, and then next on the agenda is, assignment of students in the district under administrative regulations.
Yes, so this, the focus of this particular administrative regulation, as it was originally developed, was around the what we call partner schooling here in Lower Merion School District. The addition that you'll see here is to clarify, because it was always intended to be the intent and spirit of this, that it would apply to any student that might fall into the situation of needing a school assignment, whether they're attending full-time or not, that those students, that this is applicable to those students as well. So we were intending to make explicit what was, again, intended to be part of and the spirit, connected to the spirit of this process, so that there aren't different standards that are applied to students that fall into these categories, and that all students are subject to partner schooling in the same way. That's what's being proposed here.
Questions?
Yes, a question or just a consideration. I understand the spirit of the policy. And the last on page 25, when we name that it applies to all students, including students who attend private or charter schools, students in alternative placements, and students who are home educated. I just have concerns about how that might play out for students coming back to the district. And so I'll speak from personal experience. I have a 6th grader and a 5th grader. My 6th grader has been in Lower Merion her whole career as a student. My 5th grader transferred in this year. If it wasn't, there hadn't been room in our home school, the options would have been to either send her to another school, my 5th grader, or move my 5th and 6th grader. And because you have to be enrolled in LMSD or even submit paperwork, like she took the bus through LMSD but went to another school, it's just really disruptive for families that might be a situation. And I'm sure that's just one situation, but I wonder any consideration or how we would think of that, or if it's just a hard line. I understand the need of the district also.
Yeah, I think having worked through a lot of these, all of these scenarios together with my team since we've initiated partner schooling, there are, considerations that we work through every time, and there could be perhaps some nuanced language we can add that allow for some, additional administrative discretion, but it becomes a little bit tricky because there are so many unique circumstances, and it is not something that we want to do. Partner schooling does have a burden on any family that it impacts because they aren't attending their home school. So we're very sensitive to how we work with families through that. And I hear your concern, and we've had that. So we've worked through those situations pretty carefully. One of the things that it does also come up with is when someone that is actually attending a charter school, for example, that wants to take part in an activity. So where does that activity go? So that's another consideration. So there's different tentacles and scenarios, and it is a fairly individualized situations. So I'm comfortable with, well, I support this language, but I'm also comfortable if there's some proposed language that might allow for, consideration of special circumstances that the administration would, work through with families and not try to identify each one of those unique situations. So does that make?
You have plenary ability to make whatever changes you want. There's no law guiding you here.
Me again. I just wonder about adding in here that it might, you have that ability or nuance. I know it's implied, but I could also see a circumstance where families who don't know all the ins and outs could feel it was being applied inconsistently across the district.
So it could just be a reference to, final determination is made by the superintendent or designee, which would be whoever the superintendent designate.
Yeah, and I don't think it's as abnormal as you share. I've heard that a couple of times too. Will my kid come back and be at the same school as their sibling. So I think that is a very common thing, and I know the team thinks about that too, but I think adding something in there that we are aware of that would be helpful in a generic way. And then, question.
I'm sorry. And so what if we can't do that? Like, what if we have to split the kids?
That's why I think it's consideration and not.
Pardon me? That's what?
I think that's the difference between saying special consideration and not all kids will be in the same school as their school path as their sibling. I think that's the difference.
Okay, all right, I get it.
Some consideration discretion will be added. I see it.
Where is this going to go? And just so I can see it.
It would be.
Oh, in the policy, right?
It would be in the administrative regulation.
In the first page of the regulation? Is that where you want it, right there? Under the underline?
I mean, I have a little few concerns about if we do if a decision is made for one family and then a decision is made differently for another family, there's going to be questions about what criteria were used.
Yeah, I agree. And they're going to say, well, if you did make a special consideration for X, why won't you make a special consideration for me? Why? I wouldn't do it, Curry, but you guys.
I think, I disagree on the circumstances. Like an example, I would say, I would have, as a parent who would be impacted by this, I would have a different perspective if like I had one child in high school and one child in middle school, and a consideration was not given or an exception was not given in that case versus the same school.
If it's going to be an argument, then just put that the two kids will stay in the same school. Because if you're saying you're going to have a problem.
But I don't think that language is clear. Like,
what language?
even in the policy on the bottom, on page 24, to the extent desired by their parents or guardians, siblings who share a homeschool shall attend the same school, whether that is a homeschool or a partner school. I think that protects families just as much as the district, and as a parent, I would fight hard that my desire, I mean, the administration could do whatever they want, but I would fight hard that I want both my kids in my homeschool, so you better figure it out. So if we intend that the district has the final say regardless, I think we should either make that clear or make it clear that given circumstances, some exceptions will be made.
Whoa. So what does that last sentence mean? To the extent desired, siblings who share a homeschool shall, that means we do put them in the homeschool. Is that what that means?
No, typically we will offer them the partner school, so they both can attend the partner.
We would split?
They could either split, or they could both attend the partner school. Those are for newly registered students.
Oh, so that's what you're saying.
That's how it's.
Homeschool shall attend the same school, whether it's a homeschool or a partner school. So that's your response. That would be my response.
If there's capacity at the homeschool.
But we can't fit your one child in because class, so now your other child's going to have to go to the other school.
Yeah.
Now respond back to me.
I would say that's not what's supported by the policy. It says extent desired by the parents.
Right.
So my desire is for my older child not to have their education disrupted. And I think both my kids are entitled to go to the homeschool because my older child is already in the district.
Right, but that would also undermine the whole purpose of which is why it's been interpreted to say you can choose to have both your children attend the partner school or do the split. So that, otherwise you wouldn't have a partner. Like,
That's not what that says, though.
I
think that's what's.
the only thing I would say is to the extent desired by the district.
That's how it's been
It wouldn't be the parent.
And I would just think through a little bit more the actual circumstances we're asking families to navigate. I do think it is a different situation if kids are in different schools, like different grade bands, versus if kids are would be in the same school, and the implications we're talking about. So.
Yeah, like a first and a third grade.
right.
Yeah.
And so when we have,
So-
I'm sorry,
No, I guess all I'm saying is if that's what we want, then put that right in the policy, that they're going to attend the same school. And now, we're not going to We're not going to have this partner school concept in certain instances.
Can I, oh.
Well, is this what you're, I think it's what it should say is if a parent of a student assigned to a partner school wants the sibling to attend the partner school also, they shall be permitted to do so. Isn't that what this is supposed to be saying?
I think you could write that. I'm saying I don't necessarily agree with the policy based on the impact to certain families, depending. I get it. It's one thing if you're brand new to the district and you're assigned, but if you already have some kids in the district and some not, and that those circumstances are much different for how it impacts families.
Okay, can I just add some, give some
please,
color
please.
commentary, because these are situations that have come up.
Yeah, please.
So even if a family has a child already in the district, if they don't enroll until August, and that section is already filled, we don't have a space for that child in that, and we have other, pending, so that's another situation that they would bump a student that's already enrolled?
No, I don't want to do that, but
Okay.
can we put an actual date, that is an offering?
Well-
Because you require private school students to apply for transportation by a date
Right.
and make that decision. So could you apply the same?
Well, if you're already full, sometimes those when we decide the sections, ideally in June, because we're staffing for them, sometimes those are already at capacity.
But that's what
at
I'm
that
saying.
point.
Private school transportation has to be applied for by May or April. So could you add to the policy?
We could certainly say, by this point in time, if you have we encourage you to apply by this time. After this time, there's no guarantee.
Yeah.
We've done, we could do something like that. I just want to be careful about if we were going to impose something that may disrupt, or we would end up having to add a section to maintain class sizes if we just allow it to happen at any point in time. So I'm okay. I'm fine. I understand the point. I just think there needs to be some parameters around
I don't
it.
know if that's the right solution. I'm just saying it presents concerns for me and how it plays out with families.
And to the point earlier, I think it's okay to have different outcomes depending on the case, because there's so many different factors. Like if two kids or a kid is coming into a school at third grade and there is plenty of room in that elementary school, absolutely do it. When there is no room in that elementary school, other options have to think through. So I just want to be really clear that it doesn't have to be a cookie cutter answer, that I think discretion is, with parameters, is important.
In the first scenario that you said, there wouldn't even be a question. There's an opening.
Yeah.
So that's not even an issue. But the issue is when it's closed. Now what do we do? That's what this policy is, not the first. The second is what this policy is aiming at. So, and I'm even concerned about putting a date down, Megan, just because I know that a class could close early. A school could be filled in, let's say, May. What date would we put, what would a date be that we might put down?
Well, we do have dates now in place that says, so long as you, register by such and such a time, we will, in all likelihood, you'll be guaranteed your homeschool. And I think it's, what do we say, May? April, I believe. So we can look at, if anything, I would align with that.
Well, I would align with some other policy. Yes, I would agree with that, to align with another policy. But if it's April, the only issue that's coming out is I think, as Ann is saying, a parent decides to pull a child from a private school in August for whatever reason, and now you got that split again, or July.
I have another thing to add here. What are we determining as class size before we close a section? Because Lower Merion, as a district, we keep our class, which I appreciate, we keep our class sizes below the state average. So what I'm also, that plays into this, because legally, a student should be able to have a spot in the school up to the state policy around how many kids can be in a class.
I don't know what that class class size, but I know that we cut it at a class
We
size.
said it, cut it
Yeah.
at 24, 27.
I mean-
The state is.
Legally, no. There's no legal entitlement to attend any school. You could put any kid wherever you wanted.
But in a wealthy area, you can't tell that to people. So, you know, I've dealt with.
So,
There's no law that says legally you can put them anywhere in the school. You have to accommodate the child in the school, not in that exact class, not in that exact
It
school.
would be your class size policy. You would have, do you have a policy?
We don't have.
Well, what's our cut? Just
Guideline.
asking.
by grade, we only have this in the elementary,
So, for example, like what's third grade? You know?
24.
Okay, 24. All right, okay. So this is somewhere in policy, third, or no?
No, it's not in policy. It's in
It's
practice.
practice.
We have guidelines.
Which is,
Do you not have a class size policy?
as far as I know, we don't.
No, we don't have a policy.
Okay, well.
And just to articulate that, we do not have a class size policy, just so everybody heard it on mic.
It's just a past practice. So it's just a past practice.
It's norm. I think it's a norm.
Norm.
We're gonna name things. I have a different question about this when we're done.
Do you want to talk about that first? Are we done with, are you going to
I
look
have
up?
a question though. Kimberly, I have a question. What, in reference to this entire discussion, in reference to homeschoolers who have a right to take special classes that they want to take within the district, how are we going to manage that? Because that's also been a challenge.
And can I just add to Kimberly's question, because that was my question too, is if I read this right, I don't understand why a homeschooler wouldn't get their home school. Could you help me, and maybe that's Kimberly's first and mine second, would you help me understand, like, if they were being homeschooled and a part of what you get, or at least what I could see a lot of homeschool families want, is the support around the general school day or extra classes or extra curriculum, which is really, really important to be in your community setting. Do we say that all homeschool students after a certain period don't have that time, but it doesn't fit the capacity of the school? I just got a little lost of why we would say that.
Okay, Kari, the homeschoolers in Pennsylvania have a right to take whatever classes they want in their district.
I understand.
Period.
I'm
That's the
just
law.
wondering why we wouldn't put them at the homeschool if most of the time they,
Right.
Right, well, there's a couple things. Whether there's a capacity issue, and there's also the trying to create a consistent expectation for any student that is accessing our schools and services and supports and activities. This is just one perspective of if a student is, let's just use an athlete, a student that is homeschooled that is going to participate in athletics. And every other student that enrolls, for example, to Lower Merion this year that was partner schooled to Harriton, participated in Harriton athletics. If I'm a homeschool student and I now want to participate in athletics and I get to go to my homeschool of Lower Merion, that just feels like and we can write it that way, but I felt like that needed to be a more transparent discussion about why would someone then get to, the homeschool student gets to go to Lower Merion and play basketball or whatever sport, and everyone else that registered that had to go to Harriton for not only education, but also for, extracurriculars. That seemed to be a little bit of an inconsistency. That's not to say we couldn't write that in and allow for that, but that was just one example I could use.
But isn't this decision based on class size, not extracurricular activities?
Well, yes, and that has an impact on extracurricular activities as well, just because of the number of students that are attending any particular school. But I would say it's just about having different opportunities depending on what the circumstances are. So
Yeah.
that's just a perspective.
Thank you. I think it's very helpful to kind of see how that perspective was brought to the table. I guess what I'm questioning around this is that a student that is in the school throughout the day begins to build habitus, begins to build community, and that the extracurricular is an extension of that community. But a student who may not be in for one class or limited amount of classes doesn't have that habitus to be built. And so being a part of the actual community and seeing your neighborhood friends, that would be the reason why I was wondering why a homeschool kid, like, I don't know, my kids grew up in Narberth. Everybody knew each other in Narberth, no matter what school you went to. So if you were only doing the extracurricular activities, you already knew somebody. That's habitus. And so you don't always have an opportunity to build that when you're a homeschool student during the day, but a in-school student does have that ability to bring that over. That's why I was questioning it, but I understand your perspective.
Okay, any more questions? Yeah. Go, Anna.
I get, this goes to the
I was
class-
going to, oh, sorry.
This goes to the class size targets. I'm really in the weeds. Scott's going to give me a look. Class size targets determined by what? Like in the high schools, I would doubt that every single period you're at class size targets for a kid's schedule based on the roster versus an elementary, adding a section is a different class size situation. So within that, let's say I'm trying to enroll in my homeschool is Lower Merion High School. The sequence of classes I take is determined by the school. I'm only at the class size target for Algebra 1 in health. I'm making this up. How are we clarifying that within the policy? And not that you have to get, I'm just saying from a rostering perspective, like you should be able to manipulate the schedule at the high school to accommodate most students based on the needs and the course sequence, because it's not required. Versus at an elementary, if you hit a third grade target, there literally might not be room in the section at all, but they're with that same section the entire day.
Is the heart of the question the difference between partner schooling in elementary and high school?
No, I'm just saying it seems to me that partner schooling at the high school should be able to be accommodated by changes in an individual kid's roster, because I can't imagine a scenario that every single section of a course a student is supposed to be taking is at a class size
In
target.
other words, you don't have this problem in high school, do you?
There are different reasons. We do. There are different reasons. The elementary is more clear. For example, and I say this with sensitivity and empathy towards, these scenarios are emotional. I understand that. When I was principal at one of our elementary schools, pretty late in the summer, we met our protocol of our number plus one that we do, where we break a section. One student moved in, we broke a section. We hired a new teacher. We hired a new set of classroom materials. We put music or art on a cart and impacted the entire school. So that underscores kind of like what these scenarios are. I understand the emotional side of that and the fiscal responsibility and all these things. Partner schooling at the high school has a different impact. Lower Merion started to grow about 500 students more, and they used the third floor of this building. So a lot is about the classrooms that we're able to accommodate students, and having this grow in a way that we don't have control for can allow other problems, which we've had. Harriton doesn't have a third floor of the DAO like we have here. So we're running out of, Harriton is running out of science labs and those things. So it's about controlling, so we're able to provide an experience for everybody that doesn't grow unwieldy to not be able to control.
So then I wonder if instead of saying in order to maintain class size targets, we put some language, if we're sticking with this, around FAPE for all students or tier one, or something else that like says what you just said at the end, Scott, because class size targets kind of seems like, couldn't we, like in the high school at least, and probably in the middle school too.
So
the elementary, I think, is a completely different situation, and class size targets is kind of implicit and explicit, but at the high school, it seems like there could be much more flexibility.
Yeah, it sounds like there's more of resources and space factored in than just class size.
In the most part, there are certain exceptions. You have science labs, you have safety requirements, similar in the arts and when there's machinery. So there's definitely some classes. Overall, more flexibility for sure, but there are certain.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can add to that, but in terms of, last year was the first year we moved to, or this year is the first year we moved to applying this at the high school level. As I recently presented in December, we did identify class size, their ninth grade class, 10th grade class size. So they are targets we've established as class sizes. It's just not the individual class size that we've typically thought about at the elementary level. But I would say that it's still a class or grade level size by building. So I think we can share, obviously share out those class sizes, and maybe that's where we're headed with a policy in the future. But I think, to me, when I looked at this before, even though it was originally intended to speak to elementary only, because this was just an elementary program, because we've moved towards identifying class sizes, again, by 9th, 10th, 11th, at the high school level, I think the language is still applicable, but we can nuance it a little bit more.
So can I make a request that we look at putting together a class size policy so that we can put some clarification to some of the things that I don't know if the other board members agree, but I believe, Jason, did I hear that you had a question?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I was just going to say I appreciate all the nuances and the thoughts. I mean, I would go back to, I think what Dr. Mussolini had said is that, and I agree with that, is that, we're not going to be able to legislate every single situation in a policy. And I think that we need to defer to the administration to be able to analyze the situation and act accordingly. So I think sometimes we should be looking at these policies more from a broad perspective, like the one currently. And instead of trying to put in every single situation that we could think of, I think we have to sometimes defer and respect that the administration is going to do what's right and assess each situation and address it accordingly. So I think in this situation, I think sometimes keeping it a broader statement and allowing the administration to do what they would like, I think is maybe a better course than trying to put every single nuance or every single situation in there.
With all due respect, Jason, the way the policy committee operates is raising these questions to ensure that the language that is included in the policy encompasses the various situations that would be implemented in schools. So it's pretty standard practice for us to continue to have these conversations and to go through multiple iterations of the administration figuring out and proposing to us. Of course, they have the final say because our role is governance, but that's the purpose of our role on the policy committee and how we operate.
No, I respect that. I'm just saying that I think that from the last 45 minutes or half an hour that we've spoken about this, I think, Megan and Dr. Mussolini and Scott have all provided instances where there are nuances of this. So there needs to be situations where we can't incorporate every hypothetical scenario. We need to be able to provide the administration with guidance and entrust them that the administration is going to use that guidance to make decisions.
Correct,
and I think that getting into the weeds of all of this stuff, I think, just is going to ultimately create a problem because we're not going to be able to anticipate every hypothetical situation. I think it's important to have a class size. I've asked for that. I mean, I think that that's great to have a policy regarding class size for the elementary school level so that there's more expectations. But I just think for all of these policies, sometimes we should have a little bit more of a broader perspective and entrust the administration in their tasks. That's what they're hired to do. That's what they're expected to do. And every scenario lends itself to different situations, and they know what's going on, and they're supposed to react accordingly.
Appreciate
just be my
that, Jason.
suggestion.
I appreciate that. And also, it's not the expectation that every scenario be included. What you just proposed is not currently represented in the policy. So what we are talking about is how to add that language so it can be more broad and give families more autonomy. So thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Here, you go.
I just wanted to clarify, so on page 1, or page 24, page 1, the bottom, the last sentence, to the extent desired by their parents, guardians, is that sentence going to be, where did we go?
Workshop it.
We're workshopping it. Okay, so then is it moving to first read, repeat, first read kind of thing?
Bring it back.
This is an AR. Do you want me to read?
Okay, thank you.
Here's what I'm suggesting. Do you want me to read what I'm suggesting you replace that with would be, the parents, guardians of a student assigned to a partner school may elect to have siblings of the student assigned to the partner school if there is an opening for that sibling. Yeah.
That's fine.
Sounds great. Okay, any other questions from the board online?
Well, I have one more question.
One more question, go
In
for it,
the
Anna.
AR, I think there's some, in alignment with what you just said, which I still have, I'll go with, but fine. I do think this caveat around kindergarten should be removed. Because when it says on, thanks, Latoya, page 26, when it says at the kindergarten level, students may be assigned to a partner school for kindergarten only and shall return to their home school following the completion of kindergarten, that's in conflict with the policy overall, or let's, as an administration and board, be clear that we're making exception for kindergarten transition and not transition at other grade points, which either do them all, like 5th grade, 9th grade, 1st grade, or potentially do none.
This was added last year in connection with the transition to full day K because we weren't sure what to expect, and we didn't want to, we believed that it might cause further problems if we didn't have more discretion to return children with our discretion, like you're here for a year, and it seemed, and anyway, that's why we put it in, and we don't have any. Do we have any kindergarten in that situation this year? I don't think. We have a couple kindergarten students in that situation this year.
I was just going to say, do you know how many?
Yeah. Overall, we probably have a dozen, not quite a dozen students that are currently partner school, less than a dozen.
So let me just.
At the elementary level, more at the high school level.
So Megan, let me just understand. So maybe a kindergarten registration was like the end of August.
Or could have been October.
Right, or October.
Yeah.
So we couldn't get them into school, so they had to go somewhere. But why, how do we know we can guarantee them to come back? Because what I would say, and you tell me if I'm wrong, that's already covered in the policy. Like we should, unless you're saying maybe it wasn't because this is their entry into school. Like why even have that?
Again, based on our projections, what tends to happen year over year is that before full-day kindergarten, we would get a surge of new enrollments for first grade. So with more predictability about what that looks like, we were more confident about what our first grade numbers would look like. So based on that, and moving forward, we believed that we could accommodate. And we also know that it's a value to bring children back into their home school if they're going to start in kindergarten and be with us long term. So that was the rationale behind that. Does it continue to make sense? Again, going into year 2 with kindergarten, we still are, I would say, in that phase of what does this look like on a longer term basis. So that's why it's proposed to continue that way, but
Well, maybe we can add rules about the middle school, because it's not even addressed, or I don't see it. And
we're not, the plan, so what you're looking at now, which isn't connected to the AR, this is when we issued the AR, it said annually we would provide the guidance that more fully explains it. Again, for next year, it isn't our intent, nor are there any plans to partner school at the middle school level? We don't have the capacity issues that we do at the high school, which is why we moved in that direction, and similarly at the elementary.
Yeah, I just want to state, I still have concerns about the high school. Like, the language in the AR looks like we're just pushing kids to Harriton, because it doesn't make sense to me how, I understand that Lower Merion has more kids than Harriton, and also it doesn't make sense to me why we wouldn't be able to accommodate, or if we are not able to accommodate, why we wouldn't be more specific around what the specific cutoffs and capacity are for each grade level. And also why, even if you were new as a ninth grader, you had to stay at Harriton for all 4 years.
And we can put in the guidelines.
And not that Harriton is a bad place to be. I'm just saying, I just think it's odd that we're specifically naming this only applies to Lower Merion without being specific around what the constraints are.
Within here, as it relates to the class size? Or is the reason why?
I think both. Like it says, once enrollment has reached capacity for a grade level at Lower Merion High School, that, to me, as a high school person, that doesn't really make sense. Like, you don't have capacity at a grade level. You have capacity by sections, which aren't necessarily aligned to a grade level. So if we're talking about building, like you're moving to the DOA, we don't have enough classrooms, I think we should articulate that, not capacity at a grade level. And it just reads as we're just moving kids to Harriton. It doesn't, it's like, why wouldn't we have the same constraints at Harriton if it's about class size?
It would be. So what was proposed is that for all sections of grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, grade 12, whether you're at Lower Merion or Harriton, would have a grade level maximum. So 375 for 9th grade, 375 for 10th grade, and for 11th and 12th, it would be 400. So as far as impact goes, the only grade level that we think might be impacted moving forward is the grade 9 and 10. But when the projections are, for us, beyond the next 2 years, we believe that this isn't going to be a need anymore, just for the purposes of this discussion, but not. But so that was what was presented in December, and we can certainly incorporate those numbers into this guidance or make them otherwise publicly. They are publicly available, but we could make them more explicit in here.
I'm just interested in, I'm sorry, I should know this, I don't. How many students did have to move from, do you know the number?
It's about 35.
About 35 this year? So we basically.
At least 35.
Yeah, high school, yeah, only high school. 35 because of that 375 cap.
We'll double check that. Yeah.
That's because like in 10th grade, there were 375 and you couldn't take any more, so they had to go 10th grade to Harriton. Is that?
This year, we didn't have a, so as we instituted this year, beginning last June, we started with any new registrants. It didn't matter what grade that they were in. If they were registering for Lower Merion, they were being partner schooled to Harriton. As we considered the impact and what does year 2 look like, believing that we needed to continue based on the projections that we saw and the capacity that we, capacity concerns that we had, we looked at what would be a way to manage this, knowing that there's an expectation our 8th graders, for example, have choice. We didn't, like, a goal of ours was not to disrupt existing students that were enrolled, their ability to choose where they had that choice between Harriton and Lower Merion. So we knew that needed to be a constant. So how do we move forward, allowing for that to happen, and then continue to be cognizant of what those capacity issues were. And so to put a more defined structure in place, that's why we identified these grade level guidelines. Again, the impact, we believe, is really at it wouldn't impact any current eighth graders rising into ninth grade. They would have their ability to go to, as historically they've been permitted, but any new enrollees would be subject to these caps, which may or may not apply to them, because if we're under that cap, they would just attend their home school or the school that they would be eligible to attend. So that we were trying to be more refined and targeted in year 2, because we know that this is an impact on families, and we want to minimize that to the degree possible by balancing it. Also, it's not just the fertility, it's like there's also staffing needs. So when we saw like I think what Scott talked about, or what we have talked about, when inheritance starts to grow, like that creates new challenges in terms of maybe additional staffing needs. That's what we don't want. We're trying to manage the budget, the capacity, the enrollment all at the same time, so, and honoring the impact on families. So it really is trying to do all of those things in a careful, balanced way. And again, we can be more, like I said, we put those out, we can embed those guidelines here. We can continue to provide updates as to how many students this is impacting and what those circumstances generally look like. But again, we're trying to do all of those things to be fiscally responsible and also serving families at the highest level.
Thanks, Megan. Okay, so are we okay? So, what?
So are you going back to the AR and revising some of these as well for next read?
Sure. The guideline and the AR, we don't, like we...
Yeah, the guideline.
For sure.
Yeah, and to make the bottom sentence in the actual policy more explicit. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So we'll be looking at this again next week. Okay.
Next month.
Oh, next month, next time.
Coming back next week.
Oh, I love policy so much.
And we do, just in terms of the timing of this, we start registration pretty soon. So I just want, we typically post these guidelines soon. So we'll bring it back in early February, but at that point, we'll really need to make sure we can move forward, because people are already registering or will be registering for next year.
Okay, thanks. Questions from the?
Yes, I have a couple. Rebecca Brodsky from Ardmore. How is a partner school determined? For example, are Penn Valley and Belmont Hills considered partner school since they go to the same middle school? Or is partner school where whichever elementary school has room? And then I also have from Michelle Vessel Gladwin regarding the partner school policy and not having a grade class cut policy. Very good point brought up by our new acting superintendent. Thank you. And that's it.
Okay.
Thank
so
you.
The question about the partner schooling, we typically, it was easier when we only had 2 middle school feeder schools, because then we had 3 options for elementary partner schooling. Now we have 2, and sometimes that becomes complicated because you can have capacity issues at both schools. So we try very hard to maintain that feeder pattern. So the example of Belmont Hills and Penn Valley, we try very hard. Have there been a few exceptions? Yes, and we work through that with families. But yes, typically we try to keep people within their feeder pattern.
Okay, thank you. So we have one last thing to look at. New student activities on page 31.
Yes, so on page 31, thank you, beginning on page 28 through 30 is the policy that this particular administrative regulation falls under. For those of you who have been tuning in for a long time, may remember we did talk about, do some more significant revisions around extracurricular, co-curricular, because they used to be housed in different policies, so we were trying to bring some hopefully a better user experience to this. So if you're looking for these things, they're all under one umbrella. And we talked about we always had an student athletics policy, and identifying a gap in a specific policy or regulation around student activities. So this is the first go at filling that gap. It hasn't been vetted fully here, internally, but it's intended to be a starting point to frame out what we believe are areas to address under a student activities policy. And there's a lot of reasons that it's helpful administratively to have, I think this memorializes a lot of our practices, but because we like to honor student voice and student participation and opportunity. This gives us some framework to guide how we do that consistently across the district. And so these are areas of consideration, discussion, and again, trying to fill some gaps where we haven't previously had this type of guidance in place.
Thanks. And do we have any questions so far? No. If there, I actually was just wondering on page 32, when we're looking at the criteria, is health and safety ever part of that consideration, or does that fall under the district policies and applicable laws and district goals and educational priority?
Absolutely a consideration. We can make that explicit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Page 3, both section district's implementation shall implement periodic evaluation and criteria for starting new activities, whether health and safety is part of it. Appreciate. Sorry for the interruption. Thank you, dear. Yeah, I forgot where I was at now.
Health and safety.
Health and safety. Yeah, health and safety. Yeah, I forgot
what
what the response was, that we could add it. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Again, this is our intent would be to take this back. It's additional input internally and bring it back to you. But having your eyes on it, having more broadly, are there topics that or areas that you would like to see more developed or that we've missed potentially? So this is a first go around for this committee.
Since we tend to always get these questions when we're reviewing these, I think when we come back to it, it would be helpful to have like a scope of what we're talking about with student activities. Like, these are how many student activities we have this in each grade, like just generally like that, because it feels very much, especially because my youngest is at Lower Merion, there's a lot.
There are. I would love for us to be able to showcase the breadth of activities, and if we can do it in this forum, great, because I think it also it connects to our budget discussions, et cetera. So there's a lot of reason to, I think, illuminate it and all of the good that we believe it provides for students, but also just the realities of what it takes to manage and fund, et cetera, those types of activities.
And again, this is for future conversation, but the questions I always grapple with when looking at this is around fundraising. There's this pull and tension that I have between all the kids want to do it, but they don't have the money. How do we figure out a way around that? So it's not like only those who have the money to have a club. So I have tension there. And then the other side of it is if there's outside fundraising, how is that separate from the budget? How is it administered, reviewed, and clean? And I know, I've seen this with Crew at Harriton, and they have a machine for running that fundraising system. But sometimes it feels like if the parents aren't behind it, doesn't always support what the kids want. And so is there alignment between what the kids' choices are and what the parents' involvement needs to be? And these are all just hypotheticals that are stewing in my mind as I read this, and I just wanted to share it because it'll probably come up next time.
You're, this is why I love policy, but you're asking really good questions because I think that's the stuff that we want to bring up so that we can have that discussion about what should that look like? What should that experience be? Fundraising is a big one. And certainly as you suggested, there are different ways that we can look at that, and there are different burdens that places on families and students. And we just want to make sure that we're doing the right balance and doing that consistently.
I have a question to sort of add on to the future discussion that we might be having. Well, one comment and one question. The comment is on page 28, under definitions of extracurricular opportunities, it says, shall mean those activities which are sponsored or approved by the Board of School Directors. Sponsored, does that mean with sort of a spirit of support, or does it mean, because I think that could be read differently. And then and that's just for discussion, not just for thoughts. And then with regard to fundraising and having an overview of what is being offered, how, if there is a process, what is the process for sunsetting a club or an activity that no longer exists but might have a fund balance? Because I know that exists. And how do we report that? What do we do with money that is still in the fund that isn't necessarily being used? Or that would be helpful to, if there is a policy around it or a procedure, that would be good to know. Otherwise, just to flesh out what, snapshot of what's going on.
I would agree. There's been in situations when I was on HSAs and then also that would fall under the clubs here, the the booster clubs too. There's the policies governing them, but when something implodes or doesn't move forward anymore, there's been questions about who can take over that balance. And having clear guidelines would be and not everybody has applied for 50C3 status to have the nonprofit laws apply.
Yeah, but to be clear, booster clubs will not fall under this policy. Okay. Booster clubs falls under parent organizations and booster clubs, totally different set of rules. And
I'm specifically asking about student.
I understand. No,
you're talking about students, but student organizations. But I was thinking about what Curry was asking about, because a lot of those things, the fundraising are for certain clubs, and are parents governing those parents fundraising through booster clubs. Isn't that? Am I incorrect?
And my question was less around that, but just around, are we creating a fair and equitable system when? What's the barriers to kids? What's the barriers to kids to be included? What's the barriers to kids for transportation? Like all those questions around this is, but I hear you on the question, and this is great. We can talk about booster clubs and what they were not.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, Ken, look, Abby brought the question up, sponsored or approved. So Curry, as a board, you have not approved crew, right?
I don't know, maybe 25 years ago they did, or 50 years ago.
It's a club, right? Scott, do you know? Crew.
Yeah, it's a club.
Yes.
It's not like nobody's getting a stipend, right, from the district to.
No,
Yes.
we
are
are coaches, yeah.
The district pays them.
Yes.
So then it is approved. So I guess I'm getting to what's the difference between sponsored and approved? Is there some example of something that you fundraise for that is not approved by the board, but our kids participate?
Is that in the student handbooks?
So we're going to need some clear definitions around this too, because that's a great question and makes me think, I personally, as a parent and a board member, see a lot of impact on our budget around crew, for example, and a lot of discussion and a lot of time on that as well. And I love crew, just want to be clear on that. But when we think about it differently, how do we see that differently than football? Because to me, a lot of our kids do that. We're paying for space. We have 2 different clubs that our crew does. It's traditionally a part of our community. It's traditionally a part of this area. So that's, I think, having understanding of what are the different types of activities and what are the ones approved by the board and what are the ones that impact the budget, like all of those, that would be really helpful. Now I don't realize I totally didn't understand the difference between those layers.
No, and just to provide context from previous policy years, that's how we got to this place and having deep discussions about the finance, the differentiation. So like Megan stated, this is the first time, but Mel and Lucy and Megan in partnership with previous administration, that's how we're here. And just wanted to point out, I know the difference between the fundraising machine for crew and let's say like, I don't know, other, but it was clarified in our policy. It was in our policy previously, still is here, that any student has the opportunity to attend and is protected to have any challenges with financial hardship, not be a barrier to participation previous to this version. So just wanted to state that so there wasn't questions there. The only other comment or question I had was on page 29. At the bottom, we articulate that it's kindergarten through 12th grade. And I just wasn't sure if students that are entitled and stay in our school till 21, if they're categorized as 12th graders in the system. I didn't know, but if they are not, would consider expanding that definition.
Yeah, we'll make sure that it's consistent, but we would consider that any child attending our school, whether they're beyond 12th grade, that would be inclusive of those students.
Maybe a way to go around to clarify that is to just say all students enrolled in our district.
Yeah.
Because kindergarten through 12, if that way everybody's got an enrollment.
Yeah, actually, if homeschoolers can come in and do activities too, that would probably all school, that we'd need to. So. Is there more questions still coming, or should I go? Does anybody on the board members online have any questions? I don't.
No, thank you.
Thanks. Is there any questions?
Not on this topic.
Okay. Okay. So are we going to just bring this back for more conversation or more? Yes. A question. Oh, sorry. I keep covering. Come on up and. Please state your name and where you live.
I almost messed it up. Holly Salzberg Duncan. I live in Wynwood. Hi. Okay. So how does the community, and I'm trying to learn really fast. So how does the community find out, like you guys are asking? I know people have asked, I have not, but I know in the past people have asked, what are all the extracurricular, co-curricular, club, organization, whatever the semantics are for it all? What are they in the schools? So let's just say school district to make it easier, because different elementary, middle, they're all different. Nothing's universal, which is kind of hard to understand, and I'm sure there's reasons, I don't know. And how much does it cost? Not what it impacts, just even if it's, I'm making this up, $5, not the impact to the budget. I think the community would really appreciate, what does everything cost? Whatever the amount. Certain curriculars are more than others, rightfully so. And I would never want for me to decide which is more important to someone. Crew is so important to so many. And so is football, and so is theater, and so is chess, whatever it may be. I'm only listing the ones that are popping up in my head. So I think as a community, and I cannot speak for everyone, and I would never try to, but overall, I think it would be really helpful. Like, we have no idea what anything costs at all, or the amount of extracurriculars that are even offered, or where they're offered, in, out, whatever.
Typically, and I'm sure you guys do, this law, I mean, typically, all of those activities are approved before each season, and well, I guess the cost for the coaching would be also on the agendas and approved. Total cost. So that would be probably broken in the budget. But you'd have to dig, I mean, not the budget that you're seeing, but we can get all that. I mean, that's all, it's all budgeted, so it's all there. Yeah, oh yeah.
And, you
there's
see bits and
no
pieces
question.
of it.
Yeah.
But it's hard to track, like what's approved here, what's approved there. And I think more community members are getting involved, which is a wonderful thing because it takes both parties, right, to make the best world for our children. Because you're at whatever your home life is and then your school life. It takes everybody. So if there's a way to have, yes, like a spreadsheet for all of us to see, and I don't know exactly, data, you're probably going to hear about this for the next 3 months. Data is a big one, like what are the answers? And everyone's trying, but what are the answers?
Big data guy, so I agree with that.
All
So,
right.
we're good with that. We're good with that.
Thanks, Holly. Any other questions from the audience?
Okay. I just wanted to point out that there are nice definitions in the policy of the different categories and sections, and then having a chart to associate it with that, which each, I mean, don't make it a chart. I just love charts. But like I could see a chart with each one of them and those pieces is really helpful. But those definitions are quite helpful in the policy. I just wanted to point that out to everybody to dig into that and look close too.
Yeah, and they look differently, too, at each school level, too. I mean, most of the time in the elementary school, there's a lot of HSA driven, and you only know about it when you read the Thursday folder in the newsletter. And a lot of those are from outside firms, but it's still the cost of people that have to stay after school and to keep the building open and ensure the children arrive home safely.
I was just going to say, Holly, just to clarify, would you recommend putting the cost it is for families to participate and the total cost, or you mean one or the other? And you don't have to answer, it just sparked for me, yeah.
I think overall my first gut was...
Holly, you're going to have to come up to the, thank you, sorry.
Something to definitely think about. I think overall people, or maybe myself, I want to see, here's our budget, ding, 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 ding. Wonderful, but what is coming out? And then, of course, who you financially have to help wonderfully should help, and how that works. And then maybe it would help. Why not? If you have the information, and you know, there's inflation and cost is going to change, but if you have it, put it. Would be my answer.
Yeah, okay. Great, thank you for that. And then the only other context I was going to provide, which you alluded to about which ones are at which school. Generally, my understanding, and it's outlined here, is that teachers or staff members sponsor the clubs, and so sometimes there's a difference because of who is available or who is volunteered or who is leading it. So that'll be an ongoing thing because of the adults in the building. So I just wanted to put that out there for the community that it won't always be the same at every school.
It isn't the same.
On the school websites, do they not list their
Yes.
clubs and activities?
Some of them
Yes.
do.
Yeah.
But they don't have all of them, because Lower Marion has like a ton of options. They do this great event in the beginning of the year, and all the kids go around to all the club tables
Right, yeah.
and talk to everybody. It's exactly what you want to see at our schools. And Harrington probably does the same thing. I just know it better at Lower Marion. And so like that, I think, is a really helpful thing. And I don't know if you could list, they're listed on there, but that is really student driven. And I think that's what's great. And Harrington, what's also student driven is that the students come up with an idea for a club and they can lovingly coerce a teacher to be a sponsor. They can add that club within that year, correct? Because I feel like the rock climbing kids did that.
They can, and you're right. And the spirit of it is that everybody's included in something extra, that they find identity in the school in some way. One of the challenges you ask, they listed, they fluctuate so frequently. But at Harrington, they call it Ram Day. And it happens twice a year. Once when 8th graders come and visit at the end of the year, when they make their school choice, so they can say, hey, these are the opportunities available to you. Sign up, get involved, so they stay in touch with the school. And then in the fall, in the first couple weeks, each school does a second one.
Okay. Thanks. Oh, thanks. No. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, questions online? If we're, oh, yeah, you.
Are these for any topic, or are they, because I think we have the
I think-
nutritional services thing next?
Well, I think we're, just because of the time, I want, there may be other questions. Thank you, Mr. Hussain, for being here today. I apologize for bringing you here, and we didn't get to that part of the agenda. But like I said earlier, these are substantive changes, so we believe we can move forward with them with Ken's approval. We can always bring back that discussion if there are other questions related to this policy, but that's, I guess it's to your discretion as a committee if you want to continue, or how do you want to?
About this policy, we're just.
If you want to take some time today, we're over typically what time we have, and
The changes are truly non-substantive, so.
To move it to the first reading?
They're just, you don't even need that. You
Okay.
just need to announce as part of your policy committee report that non-substantive changes were made to policy. And that's all you need to say.
I thought we were looking at the AR here. Or are you are you talking about policy 812?
812.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I thought we were
Okay.
sort of trying to figure out where we are in this
Yeah,
particular meeting agenda, and I would just recommend that we maybe wrap up, but again, that's your call.
How does the board feel about just moving it to first?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, it's almost 11 o'clock. Okay, so, but questions, like general questions? Just
You have the discretion to limit the questions just to what's on the agenda.
Okay, okay.
It's given the time limitations you have.
Okay, do them time, okay. Okay, so if that's the thing, then we will be, we're okay to move, policy A12, there's, 812. And we are, due to the limitation of it's almost 11 o'clock, that the changes are not substantive, and we're wondering if we can just move it forward to first reading, and then we'll.
Not first reading. No, this is simply a heads up.
Heads up.
Guys, we're changing, making non-substantive changes. We're making you aware of it. That's nothing else to say, kind of a thing.
Yeah, works for me. Okay, so we can move that to first reading then. Okay, and there are questions online that are in
They're not
related.
associated with today's agenda. They're just any topic. That's,
Yeah, can you just read them? And then-
I will.
Okay.
Michelle Vessel from Gladwin asks, let me see, because there's a part of it in something that I already, she's saying that regarding anti-Semitism training, is there a proper meeting to ask for those questions to be addressed, or should I bring them up at the next curriculum meeting? I will list the questions here in case you can address it at this meeting. Thank you. 1, why did you decide not to proceed with Stand With Us for the anti-Semitism training for our district? This program has already been approved by Dr. Yanni, and yet it was ultimately scrapped. 2, how will the data collection for oh God, help me. Thank you. Incidents be implemented. Michelle Vessel also continues with number 3, will parents have access to the information and materials that will be used in the anti-Semitism training? 4, how many training sessions or anti-Semitism will you provide for teachers and administrators? Last year, this training was only conducted for administrators. The teaching for students was not consistently implemented by all teachers, and this needs to be redone for all teachers who are fully trained on how to deliver the material effectively. 5, are there any lesson plans currently in place for all students? If so, when will they be implemented? If not, can we prioritize this? I can print this out for everyone if you're feverishly writing. Wait, there's more. I ask because only grades 4, 6, and 9 are scheduled to attend the Weissman residency. Will all students in those grades be given the opportunity to participate, or only selected groups? She also continues to say that I would also like to propose the formation of a dedicated committee to address anti-Semitism in education. CARE is for racism, not anti-Semitism. The need for a committee strictly to address anti-Semitism in education is critical. There are ongoing microaggressions within parts of the curriculum that perpetrate harmful stereotypes, such as portraying Jewish people as white oppressors. We do not have a proper Middle Eastern history curriculum or Holocaust education in our curriculum. While I understand this is not currently mandated by the state, LMSD has the opportunity to take the lead in implementing necessary and impactful changes. It is also very concerning that the definition of anti-Semitism adopted by the school district is not fully understood by administrators, school board members, or teachers. Adopting a definition without ensuring clear comprehension and application renders it ineffective. I must also address the urgency of this issue. The request for anti-Semitism training has been ongoing for over a year with little to no meaningful progress. The result of this delay has been an increase in anti-Semitism and/or Jew hatred within our community. This includes inappropriate comments from members of the school board, from community members speaking at meetings, and through incidents targeting our children in schools. Michelle also says she agrees that policies are important and should be looked at. It was stated at the last meeting that this policy that was going back to the, was looked at it because it was found in another school district. Let's go down. Sorry about this. They're coming in differently.
Are you, are you able to respond to her question?
No, we don't have time for that. So I think one of the things that we were discussing at the table that wasn't clear to everybody is that our time is limited, and we also recognize that when we're on an agenda topic, we want to address those questions first, and then when we start to run out of time, that the community can always type it in there, that Denise will reach out, send it to all of us, especially the committee chairs. They can ensure if it's appropriate for this committee or a different committee, because some of that is actually very appropriate for curriculum committee or a general board meeting. Make sure the administrative team has the appropriate questions and responds to the person directly. Also, I really want to encourage, you can always email the committee chairs or community comments. That is another way. You can always CC me and Todd on there as well. We make sure that we do our job of getting it to the right people. Like I shared something with Scott the other day, and within 48 hours, he got it back to me, and now we're just figuring out how to get it to more people. So we're not good. We have limited time.
I was just going to ask her to respond to this offline.
Yeah. Yep. Great. Thank you, Mel.
And then I just have one from Michelle McGill from Ballackinwood. It is very important to consider the social and emotional well-being of students, one of which is allowing children to attend schools with children in the community they live in. Also, the board is responsible for making sure that all possible layers or possibilities are addressed. Also, it is very disappointing to hear board members saying, let's trust the district and allow them to do their jobs. The board is charged with oversight of the administration, and I am definitely seeing a difference when a personal interest is being presented.
Thank you. So with that,
Can I ask a quick question, unrelated to the comments? Was the person who was sitting here, was that the person involved in nutrition services?
yeah.
I feel kind of badly that he sat through the meeting and wasn't able to be involved in it. I realize why we moved through it, but I want to be, respectful of his time. Is there something that he could email, or so he doesn't have to come back to another meeting if there's a way to preserve his time?
Well, we invited him to attend, and he was interested in attending because we had it on the agenda, but because it's non-substantive changes, we really weren't going to bring it back. I mean, at any point in time that the board would like to have a presentation on nutritional services, we could do that, but that really wasn't the intent. It was just if other questions came up, he would be available to answer them. So
okay.
We won't
need him to come
again
back. Yeah, thank you. That's what I just wanted
attending
to
in the future, but
thanks for being here.
Yeah, I will pass that along if
you.
he's not still listening. So thank you for recognizing that.
Thank you for thoughtfulness. Yeah. Okay, with that, that brings our January 10th policy meeting to a close, and our next meeting will be on February 7th, 2025 at same room, same channel. Okay, thank you.